The grand mansion shimmered under the golden glow of the evening sun. Every corner of the place spoke of wealth and power: gleaming marble floors, crystal chandeliers hanging like frozen waterfalls, and staff members rushing quietly to prepare for what was being called the most important dinner of the year. The air was heavy with the scent of roses, imported wines, and expectation. Mr. Raymond, one of the richest businessmen in the country, stood by the massive glass window of his study, looking over his empire, the same empire he wanted his only son to inherit. Dressed in a crisp black tuxedo, his silver hair combed neatly back, he looked like the very definition of control. His voice carried authority as he spoke to his assistant. "Make sure everything is perfect. Tonight, my son chooses his future." Downstairs, the dining hall sparkled with light. Long tables were set with golden cutlery and crystal goblets, ready to impress. Several glamorous women, each more beautiful than the other, sat in elegant gowns, whispering softly and glancing toward the door with painted smiles. They were the models Mr. Raymond had carefully selected, each successful, charming, and from elite circles. To him, one of them would be the perfect wife for his son, ensuring that the Raymond family name remained untarnished. Adrian arrived moments later, stepping out of a sleek black car. At 27, he was handsome, educated, and humble, a rare combination that made him adored by many. But unlike his father, Adrian never cared for status or appearances. As he entered the hall, the models turned their heads, giggling and fixing their hair. Cameras clicked, and whispers floated through the air. Mr. Raymond clapped his hands for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced proudly, "tonight is special. My son has returned home after years of studying abroad. And I believe it's time he begins the next chapter of his life, with a woman worthy of our family." Polite applause followed. Adrian forced a smile, but his eyes drifted away from the sparkling crowd to the far end of the room. There, quietly serving drinks and arranging plates, was Maya, the young maid. Dressed in a simple black uniform and white apron, she looked nothing like the glamorous women around her, yet something about her presence felt peaceful. Her movements were graceful, her smile soft, and her eyes warm in a way that made everything else fade for a moment. Throughout the evening, Mr. Raymond kept praising the guests. "This one has modeled for international brands," he boasted. "That one is the daughter of a senator." But Adrian barely listened. He noticed Maya gently helping another servant who had dropped a tray, whispering, "It's all right, accidents happen." She then smiled at a nervous waiter, steadying his trembling hands. Her kindness wasn't loud, but it was real. Later, during dinner, one of the models leaned toward Adrian and said playfully, "You must have traveled a lot." "Paris, Milan." He nodded politely, replying softly, "Yes, but home feels different." Across the room, Maya was pouring wine for a guest when their eyes met. For a brief second, time stopped. Her eyes widened slightly before she quickly looked away, embarrassed. Adrian's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know why, but that small moment, that shy glance, felt more genuine than all the rehearsed smiles that surrounded him. As dessert was served, Mr. Raymond raised his glass again. "Son," he said, his tone proud yet expectant, "by tomorrow, I hope you'll make your choice." The Raymond name deserves nothing less than perfection. Adrian looked around the glittering table, his father's words echoing in his mind. The models laughed softly, their laughter like music rehearsed for performance. And then he glanced once more toward the corner where Maya quietly cleared the dishes, her eyes filled with humility and quiet strength. That night, as the mansion's lights dimmed and the guests departed, Adrian stood by his window, unable to shake the image of her from his mind. In a world built on wealth, one simple smile from a maid had stirred something he didn't understand yet, a feeling far more powerful than luxury or pride. Something that whispered softly, "Maybe perfection isn't found in beauty or money, but in the heart." The next morning, the mansion buzzed with excitement and gossip. News of Mr. Raymond's selection dinner had already reached the city's social circles. Everyone wanted to know which model the billionaire's son would choose. The staff whispered among themselves, speculating and betting in secret. Maya, however, tried her best to stay out of it. She spent the morning polishing the silverware and arranging flowers in the dining room, pretending not to hear the conversations around her. Adrian had barely slept. He had spent the night pacing his room, replaying every moment of the dinner. The models, laughter, their practiced charm, his father's proud smile, and then Maya's quiet kindness. Her eyes had held something no one else's did, honesty. He realized that what he felt for her wasn't admiration, it was connection, something deep and real. By dawn, he had made his choice. When evening came, the grand hall was once again filled with elegance and expectation. The same models returned, dressed even more beautifully, their perfume lingering in the air. Mr. Raymond stood at the center of it all, his expression full of pride and certainty. Tonight, he declared, my son will choose the woman who will carry our family's legacy. Applause followed. Adrian entered, his expression calm but determined. The eyes of everyone in the room turned to him. The photographers stood ready, the models smiled with anticipation, and Mr. Raymond nodded approvingly. Adrian took a deep breath. His father's voice echoed in his mind. The Raymond name deserves perfection. But perfection, he had realized, wasn't about appearances. He looked at the faces around him, all waiting for him to point at one of the glamorous women. Instead, he turned slightly, toward the corner of the room. Maya stood there, nervously holding a tray, her eyes wide in confusion. I've made my choice, Adrian said softly, his voice steady yet filled with quiet power. I choose her. For a moment, the entire hall fell silent. The music stopped. The only sound was the soft clatter of Maya's tray as it slipped from her trembling hands and crashed onto the floor. Everyone turned toward her. Mr. Raymond's smile froze. Adrian, he said, forcing a laugh, I think there's some mistake. No, father, Adrian replied firmly. There's no mistake. I choose Maya. The models exchanged looks of disbelief, whispers breaking through the silence. Some laughed quietly, thinking it was a prank. But Adrian's gaze didn't waver. He walked to Maya and gently took her hand. She's the one I want to spend my life with. Maya's heart raced. Sir, please, she whispered, tears glimmering in her eyes, don't say such things. They'll misunderstand. I mean every word, Adrian said, his voice soft but unwavering. You're kind, honest, and real. I don't want a name or a brand. I want a person who makes me feel human. Mr. Raymond's face darkened with rage. Enough, he thundered, slamming his glass onto the table. Do you realize what you're saying? She's a maid. Do you intend to disgrace our name in front of the world? Adrian met his father's eyes, his jaw tightening. The only disgrace, he said quietly, is choosing image over heart. Gasps filled the room. The models looked away awkwardly. Maya pulled her hand back, trembling. Please, she whispered, you'll lose everything because of me. Adrian smiled gently. Then it's worth losing. Mr. Raymond turned away in fury, signaling the guards. Get her out of my sight, he ordered coldly. But before they could move, Adrian stepped in front of her. If she goes, he said, I go too. The silence that followed was heavier than before. The father and son stood face to face, one built by power, the other by love. The tension was suffocating, and the models quietly slipped out, realizing the spectacle was no longer glamorous. Mr. Raymond's voice broke the silence, cold and final. You're making a mistake you'll regret forever. Adrian took Maya's trembling hand again. Maybe, he said softly. But it'll be my choice. And with that, he led her out of the mansion, leaving behind the glittering chandeliers and empty applause. Outside, the night was quiet. The stars shimmered above them, free and endless, just like the love he had chosen. The night air outside the mansion was cold, but the silence between Adrian and Maya was even colder. They stood by the gate, their hearts pounding with disbelief. Inside, the sound of anger and broken glass echoed faintly. Adrian turned to her, his eyes soft but full of regret. I'm sorry, Maya, he said quietly. You didn't deserve to be dragged into this. Maya shook her head, tears glistening under the dim streetlight. You shouldn't have done that, sir, she whispered. Your father, he'll never forgive you. And I'm just a maid. You can't throw your life away for someone like me. Adrian smiled faintly. You're not someone like you. You're the only person who's ever made me feel real. His voice trembled slightly, but his conviction was unshakable. He reached for her hand again, but Maya hesitated. Behind them, the mansion doors burst open. Mr. Raymond stepped out, his face red with fury, his expensive shoes crunching on the gravel. 2 guards followed him, hesitant but ready for his orders. "Adrian," he shouted, his voice thundering through the night. "You think you can humiliate me in front of the entire elite circle and just walk away?" Adrian stood his ground. "I didn't humiliate you, father. I just made a choice you don't understand." Mr. Raymond's eyes burned with rage. "You call that a choice? That woman," he pointed at Maya like she was dirt, "is beneath you. Do you have any idea what people will say when they hear my son ran away with a maid?" "Let them talk," Adrian said, his voice low but firm. "For once, I'm not living for them." Maya's eyes filled with tears, her lips trembling. "Please, sir," she said softly to Mr. Raymond. "Don't blame him. I'll leave. It's my fault. I should have stayed invisible like always." Mr. Raymond's face twisted in disgust. "You're right. You should have." He turned to the guards. "Pack her things and throw her out tonight. I don't want her name mentioned again." Adrian stepped between them. "If she leaves, I'm going too." His father froze. The weight of those words hung in the air like a storm about to break. The guards looked at each other, unsure. Mr. Raymond's jaw tightened. "You'll regret this," he said bitterly. "Everything you have, your inheritance, your name, your future, it's all gone the moment you walk out that gate." Adrian looked him in the eyes, calm and unwavering. "Then I'll start from nothing," he said softly. "But I won't start without love." For a brief moment, Mr. Raymond faltered. There was a flicker of something, fear, pride, or maybe the pain of losing control. But it disappeared as quickly as it came. "Fine," he spat. "Go, then. See how far your love takes you in the real world." Adrian turned to Maya, his voice gentle. "Come with me." She hesitated, glancing back at the mansion she had worked in for years, the place that gave her shelter but never belonging. Then she nodded. Together, they walked through the gates as the guards silently stepped aside. Behind them, Mr. Raymond watched, his anger masking a deeper ache he refused to admit. The car was old, borrowed from a friend. They drove in silence, the city lights blurring past. Maya finally spoke, her voice breaking. "You shouldn't have done it. You've lost everything because of me." Adrian looked at her, his expression tender. "I didn't lose everything," he said. "I found you." Tears spilled down her cheeks. The weight of his words sank deep into her heart. For the first time, she wasn't just a servant, she was seen, valued, loved. Behind them, Mr. Raymond stood at the gate long after the car disappeared. The mansion, once alive with laughter and luxury, now felt hollow. He clenched his fists, but his anger no longer felt righteous, it felt lonely. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, his son had chosen something far richer than money. Years had passed since that night. The city had changed, and so had Adrian's life. Gone were the glittering suits, luxury cars, and champagne parties. In their place stood something simpler, quieter, but infinitely more fulfilling. At the corner of a busy street stood a small cafe with a hand-painted sign above the door, Maya's home. The name wasn't chosen for business, it was chosen because it meant something. It was a symbol of everything they had built from love and struggle. Inside, the cafe smelled of freshly baked bread and coffee. The walls were warm shades of cream, decorated with little plants and photographs, snapshots of smiling faces, friends, and regular customers who had become family. Behind the counter, Maya moved gracefully, just as she once had in the mansion, but now her smile came from freedom, not obligation. Adrian helped her serve, his sleeves rolled up, laughing with customers and wiping tables without a hint of pride. Business hadn't been easy. Their first year was full of sleepless nights, unpaid bills, and doubts. Adrian had traded his father's fortune for honesty, but the transition had tested them both. There were nights when Maya cried quietly, afraid their dream would collapse. And there were mornings when Adrian woke before sunrise to deliver coffee orders just to keep the lights on. But through every hardship, they held on to each other. One cold morning, as Maya arranged flowers on a customer's table, she paused at the sight of a familiar face outside the window. Her breath caught. The man standing there was older now, his once imposing frame slightly bent with age. "Mr. Raymond." Adrian turned when he heard the soft clink of Maya's tray. Their eyes met, and he followed her gaze to the door. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The bell above the door chimed softly as Mr. Raymond stepped inside. He looked around, taking in the humble cafe, the laughter, the warmth, the aroma. None of it resembled the sterile perfection of his mansion. Adrian's heart pounded, unsure if his father had come to scold or to seek peace. Maya wiped her hands nervously on her apron and whispered, "Should I go?" Adrian shook his head. "No, stay." Mr. Raymond approached the counter slowly. His eyes landed on a photo pinned to the wall. Adrian and Maya standing in front of the cafe on opening day, holding hands and smiling. For the first time in years, the old man's voice softened. "You built all this?" he asked quietly. Adrian nodded. "We did, together." There was a long pause. Mr. Raymond looked down at his hands, trembling slightly. "I spent my life chasing perfection," he said. "But I see now that perfection isn't built with money. It's built with love." His voice cracked as he looked at Maya. "I was wrong about you." Maya smiled gently, her eyes glistening. "You weren't wrong, sir. You just didn't know me yet." Adrian walked around the counter and guided his father to a seat. Maya poured him a cup of coffee and set it down carefully before him. The old man lifted it to his lips, his eyes misty. "This tastes like home," he murmured. For the first time in years, Adrian smiled at his father without bitterness. "That's why we named it that," he said softly. Customers around them continued their chatter, unaware that a silent reunion was taking place, a bridge being rebuilt where pride had once stood. Mr. Raymond reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a family heirloom, a golden ring. "This belonged to your mother," he said quietly. "I think she'd want Maya to have it." Maya's hands trembled as Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger. Tears fell freely now, not from sadness, but from peace. The years of separation, struggle, and pain dissolved into that single moment. As the sun set outside the cafe window, Mr. Raymond watched his son and daughter-in-law serve their last customers with laughter and joy. The warmth in their eyes was something money could never buy. He realized, with a deep breath and a trembling smile, that his son had been right all along. Wealth wasn't in the gold he hoarded. It was in the love he had once rejected, and finally found again in a cup of coffee, a humble cafe, and the hearts of two people who had chosen love over everything else.